Russia is tightening its military control over Belarus. Moscow and Minsk have completed joint nuclear exercises, during which they practiced missile launches and the movement of special munitions. This is stated in the latest report by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russian troops delivered nuclear munitions to Belarusian territory while local units practiced receiving them, equipping launchers, and moving Iskander-M systems. At the same time, Moscow conducted a series of launches of various types of missiles, including the intercontinental Yars, as well as Zircons, Kinzhals, and Iskanders. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War emphasize that these exercises demonstrate the integration of the Belarusian army into the Russian military machine. Experts remind us that in 2022, Minsk amended its constitution, abandoning its non-nuclear status, and now the Kremlin has significantly more opportunities to use the neighboring country for its military actions. What is the situation on the border with Belarus? How have security measures been strengthened in the border areas? I will ask Andriy Demchenko, spokesperson for the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine, about this. Mr. Andriy, welcome.
We welcome you to the studio.
Mr. Andriy, the president of Ukraine has repeatedly spoken about the threat of a new invasion from Belarus. Please tell us, what are the border guards currently observing on the Ukrainian-Belarusian border? How has the security situation changed?
Well, the security situation in general in our country is, of course, influenced by the position of Belarus itself. Because if we were to speak quite directly about the specific line of our border, fortunately, at this particular moment in time, we are not observing any significant movement or mobilization of equipment, weapons, or personnel, nor any buildup in the immediate vicinity of our border. Fortunately, I want to reiterate and emphasize this point once more. But overall, the fact that Belarus generally supports the terrorist country, and what intelligence units are currently observing, that Russia is putting such strong pressure on this country to get it more extensively involved in the war that Russia itself started against our country. This, of course, poses a greater risk for our country and increases the possibility of a renewed invasion specifically from the territory of Belarus. And here we simply need to consider whether these will be Belarusian units, or perhaps Russia will transfer additional forces to Belarusian territory in order to use this territory again. And the main task of the reconnaissance units right now is to actively monitor how the situation will unfold within Belarus itself, because once again, this is happening deeper inside the country's territory, not directly near our border. And in fact, this information should also play a key role in ensuring that we have every opportunity and are prepared in any direction where such events might occur, so that we can counter anything that may come from the territory of Belarus.
Mr. Andriy Demchenko, tell us, are the State Border Guard Service personnel currently recording any provocations or an increase in the number of enemy reconnaissance drones coming from Belarus?
Well, to speak quite directly and candidly, as I have mentioned before regarding the borderline, right now we are specifically talking about the land border. Fortunately, besides the fact that we are not currently observing any significant movement of military equipment or personnel, we also have not recorded any provocations at all, let alone any possible infiltration by sabotage and reconnaissance groups, or any direct provocative actions on the other side of the border, such as shelling or any other hostile activities of that particular nature at this specific moment in time. If we turn our attention to the current situation regarding the airspace, unfortunately, just a few days ago, several sophisticated aerial reconnaissance drones were observed flying directly along the international borderline with Ukraine, specifically over the territory of Belarus, so to speak, along the border within the Zhytomyr and Rivne regions. Furthermore, during the course of last night, the entry of one of the strike unmanned aerial vehicles originating from the territory of Belarus was also officially recorded. But most likely, this is a specialized device launched by the Russian Federation. However, it is important to note that its specific flight path specifically passed through a significant section of the border shared with Belarus.
Mr. Andriy, we know that during the invasion in 2022, about 40,000 Russian troops entered Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. Could you please tell us, is it currently known how many Russian or Belarusian troops are stationed in close proximity to the Ukrainian borders on the territory of Belarus? Has this number changed at all recently?
Well, overall, the number of Belarusian units that the country keeps along our border has probably remained unchanged, because since 2022, once again shifting responsibility onto our country, Belarus has claimed that the threat comes from Belarus, so it has to keep certain units stationed there. And this has been happening, let me emphasize again, since 2022. Their numbers are not increasing, their numbers are not decreasing. There is a constant periodic rotation of these units. At the same time, if we talk about the specific Russian army units, there are currently not many of them stationed on the territory of Belarus. Well, for example, back in 2023, the total number of Russian troops on the territory of Belarus could fluctuate around approximately 10 to 12,000 active servicemen. But for the most part, they were primarily involved in conducting intensive training exercises at the local ranges, using the extensive infrastructure that Belarus provided to the Russian army. Subsequently, after these trainings were completed, Russia would withdraw them back to its own territory in order to reinforce its strike operations directly on the front line, but did not bring in new troops. And in fact, if there are currently any Russian military units still remaining on the sovereign territory of Belarus, these are mostly specific units that are strictly related to logistics, maintenance, and general technical support operations. But as for specialized infantry combat units that could, as of now, successfully carry out an invasion of Ukraine from Belarus, fortunately, none have been detected at this current time. But again, those infrastructure facilities that Belarus continues to develop on its territory, including in the direction of our border, and those logistical routes that Belarus is building up, at any moment, Russia can use them by transferring additional forces to Belarusian territory.
Mr. Andriy, we have 1 more minute of airtime. I want to ask you about the following. Recently, the head of the Vyshhorod district in the Kyiv region, which includes the Chernobyl zone and borders Belarus, reported that, according to a decision by the military command, there is a task to prepare for defense, including establishing all-around defense for the settlements in the Kyiv region. Are border guards involved in this process? And how, in fact, will the all-around defense of the capital region be prepared?
Well, let's put it this way. Everyone has their own area of responsibility. If we talk about the units of the State Border Guard Service, we continue to equip the borderline from an engineering standpoint. Our engineering units are handling this in cooperation with local authorities. In addition, within their defensive sectors or in the areas where border guard units are stationed, the fortification line and defensive structures continue to be reinforced so that once again, our units, as part of Ukraine's defense forces, have every opportunity to counter any threat that may come from the territory of Belarus. The same goes for the units of the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as local government bodies. Everyone is involved within their respective areas of responsibility in strengthening our defensive resilience. And this can be either directly at the border or at a certain distance from the border. And again, we must have strong defensive positions along the entire length of the border with Belarus, that is over 1,000 kilometers. However, the threat from Belarus has not disappeared anywhere for more than 4 years now, and it will remain so until Belarus stops supporting Russia.
Andriy, thank you very much for joining our broadcast and for this conversation. Let me remind you that we were joined by Andriy Demchenko, spokesperson for the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you.
No half measures instead of real membership in the European Union. Kyiv has firmly rejected the German initiative of Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who proposes special but limited conditions for Ukraine's European integration. In a letter to the leadership of the European Union, Volodymyr Zelensky directly stated that any status without full voting rights in the European Union is categorically unacceptable for our country. Oleksandr Muzychuk will tell you more.
Instead of full-fledged European integration progress, there are compromise half measures. Kyiv has firmly rejected the German initiative, which was supposed to establish special but limited relations between Ukraine and Brussels. In his formal and official letter to the leaders of a united Europe, President Volodymyr Zelensky explicitly and firmly stated, any so-called surrogate statuses that leave our country without a real voice at the European table are categorically unacceptable. Germany's proposal to grant Ukraine the status of an associate member of the EU is fundamentally unjust and inequitable, as it would deprive Kyiv of the right to vote within the European Union. Earlier, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz proposed allowing Ukraine to participate in EU meetings without voting rights as an interim step toward full membership in the European Union, according to Spiegel. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is planning to formally propose a brand new special status for Ukraine in the form of an associate member of the European Union. In a letter to EU leaders, he outlines what this membership would entail. Ukraine will not initially receive full membership or voting rights, but will be more closely integrated into EU institutions. Zelensky thanked European leaders for their support during the war and noted that today Ukraine serves as a shield against Russian aggression for the entire European Union. He strongly emphasized that Ukrainians are completely and fully protecting Europeans, not partially, and are putting forth every possible effort, and therefore deserve a fair approach and equal rights in Europe. We are actively conducting diplomatic work with our partners in the European Union to bring Ukraine's membership in the EU closer. Ukraine is fighting for its life, for its independence, and for that Europe which has lived in peace the longest, protects people and life, and defends culture. And it is precisely thanks to such protection that it plays a truly global role. In the absence of Ukraine, there can be no fully realized European project, Yemiyash. And Ukraine's integration and presence in the EU must also be entirely full and equal. As Spiegel writes, the status of associate member, proposed by Merz for Ukraine as a temporary solution, envisions granting Kyiv broader rights and obligations than candidates usually receive in the classic accession process. This includes in particular gradual integration into the EU budget, the extension to Ukraine of the EU treaty articles on mutual assistance and defense, which would provide certain security guarantees for Ukraine, and Ukraine's special participation in the EU court. Merz recommends retaining a mechanism for reducing these rights if, on Ukraine's path toward European integration, there is regression and its policies begin to diverge from the fundamental values of the European Union. At the same time, he proposes to offer the Western Balkans and Moldova not identical but separate plans for accelerated integration into the EU. Let me remind you, this is not the first idea of partial accession of Ukraine to the EU as a way to ensure a compromise between Kyiv's aspiration for rapid accession and the desire of EU countries not to deviate from the full procedure and not to make exceptions that could lead to problems in the future. In particular, discussions about Ukraine's advanced accession were reported unofficially in February of this year. Oleksandr Muzichuk with the details for Inter TV channel United News Marathon.